now we begin. And indeed, greetings unto you, beloved and holy friends. Indeed, greetings unto you who have traveled so far that you cannot remember the ancient beginning. And yet I say unto you, you have never traveled apart from me. For always and eternally, the one whom the Father has birthed to shine forth the glory of God is one being, one soul, of one pure existence. This is in truth who you are and remain. This is in truth all that you ever shall be. And yet, you have dreamed. You have believed and desired in the infinite freedom that the Father has extended unto us to generate that which is called separation. And from this ancient separation, you have looked out and seen an unreal world. Indeed, you have brought forth world upon world upon world upon world upon world, descending, cascading, losing the vibration of the oneness of the pure light in order to create experiences, in order to taste what it is like to live from the knowledge that you have infinite freedom to create as you will. And in that will came a point and a moment when you began to lose the holy sight that your will is the Father's. You began to usurp or take ownership of that will. And there arose a tiny mad idea. What would it be like to create an energy that the Father does not know? And that energy can only be the contraction of fear. This is indeed then the one energy you can be said to have actually created. By taking love and turning it inside out, to veil from yourself, yourself. To create the mirage, the illusion, the distortion, the optical delusion, that you look out upon things that are not an aspect of yourself, that you can indeed look upon something that is not yourself, that you can thus create through further reverberations of fear that which is entirely separate from the love of God, and look upon it and believe that separation is true. All healing, then, is a return to original wholeness, the re-illumination in the depth of that which sees, so that that seeing is once again one with what God sees. God then looks upon you and sees only that self which that one has birthed. This never deviates and never changes, and thus in the Father there can be no judgment, since the Father sees only that which is like unto himself or to herself. Yet as the Father looks upon you and sees this radiant infinite light that in itself demonstrates the existence of God, the Father looks upon you with this great delight born of infinite freedom and fully allows you to create whatever experience you wish, knowing full well that what you create can only be a temporary vibration that generates a certain optical delusion, a certain quality of experience that you will soon grow tired of as you begin to finally notice that there's something you desire, yet something you seem to have lost. In the journey then of what appears to be each individual soul, like a star that has burst into a million tiny stars, yet still made of the light itself, there is a moment, a stirring, a turning that begins, in which that soul, which is still one and the same as the one being that the Father has created, the one light, there is a stirring, a desire to know, a desire to return to original wholeness. And from that moment, and I've shared this many times and in many ways, from that moment, as the desire begins to be finally not to create unlike God any further, because experience of such is complete, but rather that very moment when desire is for original wholeness, to return home, in that very moment, the Father itself begins to penetrate his creation, begins to shine the magnetizing light of its own essence deep into that which you have sought to create and have believed has been lost from the Father, and begins to magnetize you back into itself, which is to return to your own self. One creation in this infinite cascading descension of dreaming that lowers qualities of vibration begins to omit certain angelic frequencies that are no longer possible as you condense through the energy of fear, is the arising of the physical universe, and that which gives birth to what you call the body. There can be no further descent into separation than to come to believe that you are the body itself and nothing but this. For the eyes of the body can only show you an unreal world. That is, they can only prove to you, as you look through the eyes of the body, that separation indeed exists. If you are observing this context on what you call your video devices, you will look out through the eyes of the body and believe that you are looking at another body, generating some words and some teachings in a place far removed from where you are, because you think you are the body. And you have thus dismissed everything that is around the body. That indeed, if you could but receive it, because separation does not exist at all and never can, you are everywhere now. Not the body, you. The potentiality of what you call awareness to enlighten consciousness, that which knows something is, that field of potentiality of light is surrounding the body right now. It is infinitely beneath the body. It is infinitely above the body. The body then has arisen within this perfect oneness of light. This you are, and this you remain. And when the turn begins, and the delicious desire is born, to venture through what appears to be the unknown, so that you can recover original wholeness, the thought never occurs that you must already know what it is in order to know that it's been lost. You then do not trust that there is a great awakening in the seat of your own soul, that indeed that awakening has already occurred, that will inevitably bring what you call enlightenment to the fullness of your radiant consciousness as you recover the lost sheep, the lost dimensionality of your one being. In the midst then of this extraordinary process of the attempt to generate an energy that could create a separation and loss of oneness called fear, worlds upon worlds upon worlds upon worlds have been generated until you have found yourself here. And as many of you are aware, you have found yourself here quite often. For as you begin to awaken and recover the spheres of your own being, as you retrace and embrace the journey of forgetfulness into the journey of remembrance, you will indeed recover what some would call as other lives, other worlds, other dimensions. And all of this will seem to you to be so extraordinary. Yet it is simply who you are. The most extraordinary event that has ever occurred is that you believed you had accomplished separation. That is the most extraordinary event that can ever arise in consciousness. The journey home will be replete with many moments of revelation, many extraordinary moments of enlightenment, or some would say, what is the word from the ecstasis, that which breaks you out of your boxes. And again you will feel that this is so extraordinary, yet it is only a step on your return to your own original wholeness. For indeed you are that one, born of the Father, eternally made of one substance with God. I and my Father are one. And all dimensions, their barriers dissolve away, and you watch as all worlds are held within you, and in the twinkling of an eye, so to speak, although you won't have an eye, you will be able to be wherever you wish to be and be with whomever you wish to be. And as that one known as Christ, you will indeed be moved by one thing only. Finally and eternally, things will be returned to what they were in an ancient beginning, and the only thing which will move you is love. Not fear. Not the thought of the I that you have made. Not the fear that something may happen to the body, because you will see so clearly that it is not even remotely possible for you to be a body. It is possible for you to manifest, let's say move molecules around so that you create what is called the solidity of a body. You can limit your consciousness so that it is oriented only from what seems to be within a body in a particular point in space and time, and then you can pronounce, I am this. Of course that's possible, for all infinite possibilities are within you. Therefore think it not extraordinary when I say unto you that as you heal and awaken, you will discover that your true self has always been far beyond the body, yet permeating it, that the body is arising as a free choice to generate a perspective so that certain qualities of experience can be had. You are then always generating precisely what you have elected to value. And now we come a little closer to the purpose of this hour. One thing that we have valued together as one being is to infuse the furthest reaches of the dream of separation, bodies upon a planet, run by fear, resting deep in guilt and loss, struggling to survive. That which is depicted in your Bible as Adam being cast from the garden. Now there must be efforting, now there must be struggle in order to try to gain your survival, for you can see that only that you are the body. In response to the perception that separation is real, and that it indeed has generated illusions that seem to bind the holy child of God, there was birthed from the kindness of radiant compassion that is the essence of Christ, emanating from you, the desire to infuse, to penetrate the dream of mankind's suffering with what we have called in this pathway the lineage, to begin to plant seeds in an ancient time, in what is called as ancient Egypt, that would begin to create reverberations, generation to generation to generation, within the matrix of mankind, born of the dream of separation, that would begin to create the soil in which deeper seeds of truth could be planted and begin to blossom, begin to radiate out into the hardness of the rocks, if you will, made up by the dream of separation. The lineage, then, that birthed me began in ancient Egypt, very ancient Egypt. Very, very ancient Egypt. It evolved over a very long period of time, slowly, carefully, mindfully, if you will, until that which was birthed, as many of you would know, as the Essene tradition. The Essenes were a widespread group, that they themselves were the flowering of a long period of gestation as light was penetrating what you may call matter, for want of a better word, as consciousness was penetrating unconsciousness, as love was penetrating fear. The essence and the truth was safely guarded and kept what you would know as secret for very good reasons. The matrix of mankind as a whole was not yet ready. The truth would have been well trampled. Over a long period of time, then, finally the Essenes began to emerge in what you call your Middle Eastern area, out of the soil of ancient Egypt, and reached as far as what you know as Persia, into what you know as India, what you know as Greece, and what you know as this place that we are in this day, called the southern part of the France, Provence. Already then there was gestated in wider and wider circles, and then also into what you call the England, this seed of a lineage that was bringing forth the knowledge of true light, of true consciousness, of true possibilities. It contained many what your world would call extraordinary possibilities. But once again, what is extraordinary is seen as such only from a perspective that is more contracted in fear and has lost that quality in itself. The ability to heal, the ability to ascend what you call ascend the body into a body of light. These things were practiced and known in ancient Egypt. The Essenes kept the knowledge, guarded it, and gave its teachings slowly to those who were both ready for it, and please listen carefully, to those within the traditions that desired to discover how to do some of these extraordinary things. The only desire that matters is the desire to heal from fear into love. All extraordinary capacities are already contained within love. Thus, while many in the Essene tradition would learn how to spend years and years and years discovering how to create the vibration to still the body's molecular movement to stillness, and they were cared for by certain priestesses who understood the whole process, the body was cared for, kept safe, and then they would simply dematerialize the body and rematerialize it. Some would practice this over and over in a given lifetime. Why? Because as they enter into the matrix of humanity, it can begin to look like this is an extraordinary thing to do. The ascending then of the body into the body of light is not an extraordinary thing. You are already beyond the body. Again, what is most extraordinary is that there could ever be a true identity with the contraction of fear and the belief that you are not as the Father has created you to be. Everything else is merely the recovery of this great moment of enlightenment when you truly see and know in every fiber of your radiant light being, I and my Father are one. God is, and only love is real. When you come to abide fully in that, wherever you are and as you are, you have indeed come to the completion of your journey. From that moment, you will indeed be moved as spirit by love itself. You will not be attached to place, to person, to image of yourself, for there will be no fear of losing what you have mistakenly believed you are and must have to maintain your sense of yourself in separation. And I would suggest to all who hear these words that you take what was just said and turn it into a prayer and a meditation and let it settle deep into your consciousness. You will no longer find any sense of contraction that must be identified with the sense of the separate self in association with the body. You will finally transcend any sense of identity with the individualized soul, and you will have returned to the recognition that you are but the one the Father has birthed. Then and only then you will look upon all others and behold only yourself. And in that beholding, because you are beyond fear, you will enfold their journey as your very own. You will look and see deeply into it, and you will suffuse that journey at the level of soul and light with light itself that begins to speed or quicken their journey. Their capacity for revelation, for being moved by this deeper desire to return home is quickened ever more deeply in the presence of those who have remembered. This then is a truth of who you are, and this is the truth of your soul destiny. Let me say that again. It is your soul destiny. There can be no other. Since the return to original wholeness brings you back to the truth of who and what you are, and then this potentiality within love itself leads the way. But this can only occur to the degree that you are willing to embrace your creations. And what have those creations been but fear itself and the effects of fear? Fear not then fear itself, but look well to discover all that has arisen from it. Marvel at it, bless it, do not judge it. For within the creations of fear is the essential power of light itself, and that essential power has never been changed. It is not affected in the sense of being changed by the forms of fear that have come forth from it. The infinite power to create fear and its effects is one and the same as the power that births the presence of Christ, right where the illusion of a separate self once existed. The power is one and the same. All that matters is, what will you use the power of awareness to create? What will you value truly? And in this realm, this means, what will you use time for? What will you use the gift of each breath for? What will each moment of experience be given unto? What will you cherish? What will you be devoted to? For it is this energy of desire that is already birthing what your experiences tomorrow will be, and you are free to experience absolute liberation as the one light called Christ. Wherever you are, there can be nothing that limits this. If the realm of the body and space and time can possibly limit your ability to rest in and awaken as Christ itself, it would mean that there is in fact a power that is at least equal to what God has created. And God creates only that which is like unto itself, the radiant field of a perfect light that knows nothing but unlimited love, in which fear is not known and cannot arise. Until it is desired, then the light of love is used to create the illusions of fear. Fear then itself cannot be anything but an illusion. Therefore, I've said often, whenever you notice that fear is present, say simply with the mind, since you have created the thinking, what you call the chattering mind, give it something useful to do. This need not be. And return to the light itself. Let that light reveal your steps. Let that light carry you. For it can do naught but carry you beyond the edges of your illusion as you recover increasingly the truth of who you already are. And in this recovery, there is never anything which can be lost. As this truth reached a place of seeding, and it was time, I was incarnate into a certain family structure, in what you know as the Palestine, within a family structure already embedded, if you will, within the Essene tradition, thus already holding the receptacle, if you will, of the vibrational qualities that I would need to be steeped in, like what you call the mixing of a stew. I was the vegetable dropped into the stew of this certain Essene family within this long lineage that had been well planted for thousands of years to bring forth a demonstration but not just a demonstration as something to be seen, but rather an explosion of light into the matrix of the dream of separation itself. My life then was about becoming human in order to remember the divine and bring forth a demonstration that penetrated and created what you would now think of perhaps as one of your quantum leaps, an infusion of light and truth so profoundly that it shook up the whole matrix of humanity with light itself. For the first time within the Essene tradition, the resurrection and ascension of the molecules of the body, to keep things simple, into the light body and then being able to appear and reappear at will. For the first time, this was not guarded within the temples and confines of the ancient Egyptian orders, the Essene temples, the secret societies. My crucifixion was public. I entered into the worst possible conditions of laying down the body in order to demonstrate that there are no conditions that can prevent you from choosing the reality of love. None whatsoever, unless you decree it so. And to then, through the things that I had learned, to bring forth the resurrected body upon the third day, to demonstrate that this no longer needed to be held and guarded and kept secret, that it didn't need the support and protection of others within the tradition, that the deeper potentiality of consciousness is that anyone can do this if they desire to do so, and give themselves the time and the devotion to activate the remembrance and how to do it, to make this resurrected body, this event occur in the midst of the ordinary world born of fear. There was one in my journey whom I met at a very, very early age. As a small young boy, I first met this one. And there was already a quickening, a stirring, a familiarity, a recognition. And then some years passed into my what you call the teen years, when we, shall we say, by chance, if such a thing existed, encountered one another again. And now the quickening was much profound, much more profound, much deeper. There was a love or a remembrance of what you know as love born. It was not a love that the ego knows as romantic attraction. It was not love born that generates the attachment to another in the sense of exclusivity or specialness. It was the recognition of a shared light one unto another, and that the light was holding us and carrying us already, and that in fact we had never lost communication as one soul within that light. Then a number of years went by before it was time for us to come together. Some would say, as teacher and student, but please let it be known that I was not the teacher of the one known as Mary Magdalene. I was her brother and friend and equal in soul, and she was as much my teacher as I was hers. There was a complementarity that allowed the vibration of the light to be what you call exponentially increased, because we were always aware of the equality of the light, and that we dwelt in the one mind of God, our Father. This insight, this knowing, vibrated within us each time we looked upon one another. There was a simple, unshakable knowingness of the truth. This then is the essence of holy relationship. And holy relationship is not a somber affair at all, but just the opposite. It is a radical celebration in great freedom. For in the recognition that you are born and made of one light, fear cannot arise. Fear of loss cannot even be entertained. The notion of separation cannot arise in holiness, in the radical celebration that we are the light of the Father, and we are yet born as individuals to bring forth and make a demonstration that would radically shift the matrix of humanity itself. This then is the essence of my relationship with the one that you have come to know as Mary Magdalene, Mary of Magdala, whose parents had come from an area called Magdala, north of Palestine. This one was also prepared within the Essene tradition from her childhood. She followed the path of the priestess. She learned to activate frequencies through the womb, through what you know as the genital areas of the body, profound frequencies through the heart, to illuminate the light through what you call the third eye and to the crown, and to radiate a power that quite frankly frightened some women and most men. This was the seeds of jealousy toward her, fear of her. She radiated such an aliveness and such a power that was itself fearless that it was frightening to most men and to some, if not many, women, but not all. Within the Essene tradition, before we really truly began to come together to work together, she was already a great teacher. She was known throughout all of the areas I've mentioned to you before. She was venerated and revered as a great Mary, a great master teacher within her own right. She followed the current of the priestess and manifested the manifestations of the feminine currents of oneness of light. She lived with great fearlessness. When it was time for us to come together, there was a great celebration. Some of you may be familiar with this. There is an element of the story, although badly distorted, in what you call your Holy Bible. Know you of that which is called the wedding at Cana? Some of you have heard of this. It has been debated, as that's where Jeszuy turned the water into wine and began to make his signs, but it was clearly somebody else's wedding. Both of those are true. Some of you have heard that, the wedding was really the marriage between Mary Magdalene and Jeszuy. It was actually his own wedding. There is a sense in which that too is true. How can all of these things be true? Well, first of all, if you are in joyous celebration, as I was that day, with other brothers and sisters who are about to join, but I'm not going to use the word marriage here just yet, would you not want your friends to have the very finest possibilities? So since I had already, from the time of childhood, been trained in changing molecular vibrations and had come to master this to a fairly high degree, although I had not yet mastered the perfect Christed wisdom of when to do it, there was still an element of belief that I must save others from their experience, even if they're not yet ready to be saved. And so I changed the water into the finest of wines. This was a marvel, for those present were not just the Essenes, but also what you would know in your day as the lay Essenes, or regular community people, and they would marvel at these things that were already known within the Essene tradition as just another day. This has then become the basis of the focus of the story on the wine itself, as though this was the great extraordinary thing. On this day, there was the recognition in both Mary and myself that it was time to activate the next stage of the unfolding of the purpose given unto us of the Father, is a way to put it, that which the heart and soul has come to know, it has come forth to bring forth. And thus this so-called wedding was a joyous celebration that involved much music, much what you now call chanting or singing of sacred words and vibrations, by many in the Essene community who knew what all of this was about. Certain masters were there. My grandmother was there. Anna was there. There were many beings there who understood the purpose of creating this celebratory context in which two beings, seemingly individual, come together to share a common purpose that transcends individuality itself. Two beings already whole within themselves sufficiently, who have transformed their humanity so that fear is not going to make a home. The ego is not going to usurp the relationship for the purposes of specialness, to fill up what you think you lack, but rather to create and anchor the purpose of this union in such light and celebration that it generates a force field, is the only way to put it, far greater than the individuals could of themselves. Thus this wedding at Cana was an initiatory celebration that involved the masters of the Essene tradition, and we invited many of our friends and brothers and sisters from the lay community to join with us, who were at themselves at various stages of initiation and learning and training. We were not the only two. There were indeed 7 what you would call couples that were entering into this and had various purposes to fulfill. Now we will come to what you call the word wedding or marriage. When the soul in separation looks upon what is called marriage or uses the word, within the matrix widespread throughout humanity, throughout the egoic dimensions of consciousness, there is the immediate belief that marriage is a separation from all others and an exclusivity of joining. One is set apart as having greater value than all others. That one then looks at you and sets you apart from all others. Know you that experience? And then you believe that you are made for each other, and now you're locked in, and you must keep yourselves locked in by excluding all others. This has come to mean what you call marriage. And in the realms of egoic consciousness, very well, that's what it means. There has then been this great mistake, a distortion of the reality and truth, that the wedding at Cana that occurred between myself and Mary was a movement toward exclusivity of joining and some form of forsaking of others. That is, love of heart, of soul, of time, and yes, even of body must now be restricted and held first for this one being, and then if I have some other time and it's okay, and the exclusivity isn't threatened, then perhaps a little more can trickle out into the world. Know you that experience and that interpretation of marriage? But in holiness there is no fear. There is no exclusivity required, for there are no holes to fill and nothing to protect. The purpose of the relationship is to radiate the light and love of God more profoundly than ever, that light and that love that destroys the illusions of fear from which the need for exclusivity arises. Therefore, know and understand well that the wedding and the marriage that took place was not of the same order and should not be understood through the lens of which marriage is understood in your world. There was never exclusivity. We didn't leave our parents' house and get a nice cottage by the lake and live happily ever after, nor did we exclude others. Our relationship was a furtherance of the celebration of surrendering to the will of our Father, and supporting that surrender in each other, regardless of what that may require. We spent much of our time apart until it was time for me to begin the manifested stages of my ministry. Then, during that 3-year period or so, we were what you call inseparable. Joined at the hip, I believe, is the phrase you have. We were rarely found physically apart from one another because we were moving into this profound matrix of generating the energy necessary, the teachings necessary. Beings were coming to fulfill their roles. Some were known as disciples. Many of those roles have been lost to history, but were equally as important. And the majority of those who were my disciples were women. We'd say in the ratio of about 8 to 1. Many of them came because they had already been trained or already been under the tutelage of Mary in various parts of the world, in Egypt and in Persia and elsewhere. Many came when they knew it was time for this work to begin. The work was profoundly supported by women and by some men. My uncle, Joseph of Arimathea, and others. Then is when we spent our great time together. Some have had a question. Were Jeszuy and Mary Magdalene what you call the intimate with the body parts? Of course, we were also human. The great difference is we did not join our body parts to gain something we think we lack or to stimulate a pleasure to get out of a pain or to gain a comfort from one another, but rather it was in celebration of resting in and as the radiance of this light itself, so that the joining of the body parts was merely incidental to the ecstatic orgasm of the union in light itself. And now I would share with you that from the time that Mary and I came together in what we can now use the word marriage, since now you will understand it, from that time at the wedding of Cana, Mary was not the only woman with whom my then body parts were utilized to transmit energy of healing light, nor was I the only male that Mary's body parts, I use this term to emphasize that the normal egoic mind places such extraordinary value on body parts, instead of on the soul and the light and the love that can radiate as equally through the fingertip as through the genitals. And the purpose for such joining, to celebrate the reality that only love is real and God is. that there is no fear, nothing to lose and nothing to gain, nothing to take and nothing to require of the other, a celebration of reality. And that, as you have come to know, the body can be used to heal, comfort, nurture, and bless. And that as you truly awaken from your identity with the body, you will see that it is just a vehicle, like a paintbrush, to be picked up and offered to God so that the light and love of God can operate through it in the way that may truly benefit and serve the other. That can be anywhere from what you call sexual union all the way to the stroking of a cheek. From love's perspective, the stroking of the cheek and what you call the sexual, what is the word you have in the copulation, are one and the same when they have the purpose of healing, comforting, nurturing, and blessing from the recognition that all is pure spirit, all is light, and all beings are worthy of God's love. Therefore, please help others to see that the element or perception of exclusivity between myself and Mary is a mistaken perception. It is what you call a projection, and often a romanticized need to perceive that we were somehow set apart and were special above all beings. This would be the antithesis of all that my Father had revealed to me, all that Mary knew and embodied. It would be the antithesis of the teachings of freedom in Christ's mind. When I brought forth my demonstration, I had already spent my last few hours before going to Gethsemane with Mary. We were deeply in prayer and meditation, in great ecstatic joy that all had been prepared and all was now to come to pass. Does that mean there was not also human feelings? Of course not. What does it mean to bring forth the light if it's not within the realm of humanity and all that it experiences, so that it can be transmuted by feeling and embracing it, by recognizing that from this hour when I was to arise and leave her, we would see each other no more in the way we had been accustomed, that a great transformation was about to take place. We were devoted to it, we were prepared for it, and in those final few hours, I submitted to her. She, as the priestess, invoked fields of light and energy that radiated through every cell of my body and helped anchor what would be your term? The coherence of a light so profound within my body that my consciousness could not waver one iota toward fear. She knew how to hold the space for this. It was part of her own healing work. She held that and brought that to be in the span of what you would know as over an hour that this process went on with just the two of us. She told me, all things are prepared, and now it's your time to go. We hugged, we kissed, we looked into each other's eyes with great joy and said, let the will of the Father now be made manifest as we fulfill the purpose for which we have come. I went off to meet with my male disciples. She went to be with certain women priestesses to again hold meditation and prayer. All was set in motion, all was prepared, all was known ahead of time. Does this mean it was easy for her? No. To observe as my body was given over to the world mind, as the world mind attempted to get rid of a quality of consciousness by attacking the body. But because of my own preparation and because of the preparation together and because of her mastery of light, I was able to give the body to every whipping, every penetration of the nails, and yet not lose the coherence of light vibrating at the subtle matrix within and beneath and around the body. Therefore, you all know the story. None of this is new now. I was indeed crucified, dead, and buried as body. On the third day, I rose. I activated the molecules of matter, is the only way to speak of these things in your world, and dissolved the appearance of the physical form in the field of the light body itself. And by the way, at that level of light, a heavy stone in front of a door has about the weight of a feather. Not very difficult to move. I ventured out then with my first steps in a light body that was also, how best to communicate this, finding the right vibrational quality so that my consciousness as pure spirit, my being as pure spirit, could manifest sufficiently a physical form so that when Mary came as preorganized to the tomb, she would see someone walking like a man. She did not recognize me because the body felt vibrationally very different. It had a slightly different appearance to it. For a second, she did not know me and thought I might be the gardener, until I spoke her name. Then instantly she knew it was I. And instantly in that moment, there was no longer a possibility of a molecule of doubt entering into her own consciousness. Some of you have had that experience where something is known so profoundly and miraculously, an experience of such light that it jolts you, and there's simply no possibility for a shadow to be cast upon what you now know. She then proceeded to fulfill her duty. She returned and told the disciples, the friends, that indeed it had been accomplished. Yet their own levels of consciousness were at various levels of consciousness. A few could accept, many could not yet believe that it had fully been accomplished, and demanded that they also see me. Over a period of many weeks, I appeared to several hundred beings in that area, friends, disciples, Essenes, in various locations and places, from Jerusalem to Capernaum and beyond. I appeared in Egypt. I appeared in England. I appeared in what you know as North America. I appeared many, many places as a way of anchoring the reality that the seed of the lineage had planted to bring forth a demonstration that only love is real, the body is not who you are, and there is no death, that you are pure spirit, could be fully anchored and made manifest. So that all of the various teachers who had helped to prepare the priestesses and the masters of the various lineages within the Essenes and with other lineages could see firsthand that it had indeed been accomplished. Had it been chosen that this demonstration would occur in your time frame, I could have sent an email with an attachment of a photo, but alas, it was at an earlier time. Mary remains in my beingness as the purest and most powerful demonstrator of Christ's mind. We are in constant communication, for there can be no separation in reality as spirit. We create together, we love together, we celebrate the oneness of truth together, and with many others. But let it be heard and let it be known that I, as individual soul, radiant light, awake in God, who is it that I, in your languaging you might say, look up to? Who would I look upon as that one who has surpassed me in the demonstration of Christ's mind? It is Mary. For though my job was done, hers yet remained. She was still in physical form. She had the great task of bringing back this message and working with levels of consciousness even within our own disciples and friends within the Essene tradition who simply could not yet accept it could actually have occurred. She was confronted with judgment, with lack of belief, with projected jealousies. All of the things you can imagine fear can project came at her. Yet she did not waver. She had seen and known and completed this great work, and she held and anchored this truth no matter what, through much chaos. In this time, as various male disciples began to bicker amongst themselves, as certain female disciples ran away and left and went back to their old lives because they could not accept that this could have actually truly occurred. And why would this occur? When you truly face accepting what the egoic level of consciousness views as extraordinary, you must also give up defending what are now in your world called your strategies of fear. You must give up your excuses. You are now at your choice point. You are at the edge of your own evolution. You're either going to have to accept it and give all of yourself to living it, speaking it, being devoted to it, and going through all that that would bring up as you deepen your own relationship with the light. And at times, there is not yet a ripeness. Know you that experience? I hear the truth, I just had a taste of it, but not yet. And so there is a recoil, a pulling away, a denying of taking the next step, which may be a discipline of practice. It may be time for your 40 days and 40 nights in the desert or in the forest alone, in which you never leave the vibration of the light and the breath within you. It may not be time for you to transcend your fear, but there will be that day and that hour, for each will indeed recover the wholeness of their being. We then, Mary and I, have demonstrated for you that death is unreal and that there is nothing to fear. That fear itself is nothing before the surrender to the power of love. She then went on to anchor the first communities or groups of the way, those that were practicing what the Essenes had taught, what I had refined and shaped somewhat differently to bring forth a deeper calling of the heart. And this was known as the Way. And groups began to become solidified in spite of the chaos and in spite of the growing, what you call the backlash. For as you know, as light comes to be established in your own being, there can be a bit of what you call the backlash in your own mind and your own emotional field. And then verily, of course, this takes place in the world that is fear itself. She journeyed with that one which was called my mother to what you now know as Ephesus, and what we knew as Ephesus as well, until she knew that my mother was cared for and comfortably situated in her hilltop home, to be looked after in her latter years. She then returned back to the area of Palestine to continue her work with both men and women, and initiating and teaching from the first levels to quite advanced levels how to work with energies. Did this involve sexuality? Yes. But just like the word marriage, the egoic mind linked to the body has a concept of what sexuality is, and may giggle about it and imagine all the huffing and puffing and all of the rest. But at this level of holy relationship and the movement of currents, there is indeed great ecstatic, orgasmic flow of light, but it's not about gaining pleasure. It's not about getting away from anything. It's about transmuting the cells of the body so that they can hold higher frequencies of light as you go through your normal daily life. That the body itself can begin to resonate with and emanate a more coherent field, a vibration of love and less fear, less and less personality is your word. So she continued to teach. She taught many, many women and initiated many women. She helped many men heal within the growing levels that were coming to practice the way, the Essene traditions yet transformed in new ways. She continued her work. Because she continued her work and other beings began to be increasingly attracted to her work, once again, as they had done with me, they thought that by attacking the body, they could get rid of the teaching, forgetting that the teaching itself is a revelation of reality and truth to which all must come eventually. And so she was exiled. In her exile, which she already knew was coming, she gladly and joyously stepped into a boat with a few others that carried her where she knew it was going to carry her here, to this area which you call the Provence, the southern of France, where she was welcomed, where there were those already waiting for her. She did not land on a strange shore. And over time, she began to do here what she had done there. She began to establish the way. She began to implant the teachings of what many of you now would refer to as the divine feminine. Better yet, to speak of divinity itself in its wholeness that transcends masculine and feminine and integrates them quite perfectly. She had certain supports. Maximine was one of them, but there were others who supported her, helped her move about. She began to teach. Sometimes many crowds would come, sometimes only an individual. But always and always and always, she could meet each individual where they were at whatever level of consciousness and feel nothing but delight that the Father had sent them to stand before her. Those in doubt, those in fear, those ready for deeper initiations, she met each one with this joyous embrace without moving a muscle, because she would look upon them from the deep joy that she knew and embodied that was unshakable. Only love is real. This one is myself. Let me love this one. Their story, what you now call your story, their fears, their woundedness, none of these things meant anything to her. She knew who they were. She held them in that frequency. She was always in delight with each and every one that came to her. As she came then to be in this beautiful place in which we now record this message, she was brought by Maximum to this beautiful cave that many of you here gathered have now ventured into, and she instantly fell in love with it. It reminded her of caves in Qumran and around the Sea of Galilee. By the way, the Essenes are great lovers of caves, whether in Egypt or anywhere. There is a quality of being in a womb-like vortices while you are above the world looking out. It opens the vision, yet keeps you very grounded deep in the sacral areas of the body. This cave then became as her home, and she was in great delight always to be in it and to welcome anyone who would come to her for healing, for prayer, for teaching, for initiation. She is, and again I say this unto you, for this is the essence of why I have asked for this opportunity to bring clarity to our relationship, the use of certain words and certain events that the egoic mind, the romanticized egoic mind, can distort out of its own projected hopes. The essence of this hour is this: Mary is and shall forever remain for me the most perfect personification of Christ mind that the world has ever seen. She is a teacher supreme. She is a lover of God, as unmovable as a mountain. She is the frequencies of softness, gentleness, expansiveness, power, unflappability, I believe would be your word. Nothing in her ever deviated in those final 30 years of her existence upon this plane from the currents of the deepest joy rooted in her humanity, what you would know as the centers of the body, all open and flowing, free of all constriction, because not one feather tip of fear entered into her consciousness. This is the being that I look upon as the greatest manifestation of Christ. And I would say in your languaging, to this day, although I no longer have days, to this day I cannot help but dwell upon her without great delight cascading through my soul and my spirit. For behold, I see the one in whom the Father is most perfectly made manifest in form. While she was in form as woman and teacher, as friend, as lover, as co-creator, as she is without the body, in all of the dimensions of her being, I see the embodiment of the most powerful rays of Christ's mind that any soul could ever be capable of. And by the way, even more than me, she loves to invite new friends into intimate relationship with her. She is available for all beings, and she will embrace you if you invite her in to the depth and degree that you are willing to let her in. And for her, that will be from what you know is the crown to the base of the body. And when you invite her in, you might feel some tingling in places you didn't know existed. For she looks upon you where you are and knows that the body need not be closed, that nothing needs to be judged, for all is the innocent expression of the radiance of the presence of God's love. That every energy is sacred, that every energy is innocent, that every energy is to be set free in its ecstasis, its ecstatic joy, that it exists at all, because those primary energies of the body exist because God longs to give of itself as creation itself. Indeed, then, welcome this greatest of teachers into your deepest heart, into the cells of the body while it lasts, that it may serve you, that it may become quickened and whole and heal and awakened and enlivened, so that the frequencies and potentialities of your very own Christedness can begin to increasingly manifest in the field of time, to be demonstrated, to be shouted to the world, "Look, behold, God is!" This is the truth she knew. This is the reality she embodied. This is the frequency or essence that she is and shall eternally remain. She is my lover, my friend, my teacher, my revelation that my Father is love and love alone. And I remain eternally grateful that I could be blessed in the field of time with such a one as this, who supported me, joined with me, showed me things I needed to learn as I showed her some things, and together we could manifest the creation of a purpose that far transcended what either of us could have done apart, and yet never with a trace of possessiveness or exclusivity, only celebration for the radiance of the Holy Spirit's guidance operating through each of us to extend the atonement into the matrix of humanity itself. This is the greatest joy the soul can ever know, to give away what the Father has first given to you. Therefore, as we bring this hour to a close, love one another. Look upon one another as your lover, as your friend, as your equal. Set all beings free from your need to possess, born of a fear that need not be. Come to know the truth of Mary Magdalene in your own being. Come to abide with us at play in the infinite realms of our Father's perfect queendom, and we shall again create together that which extends the good, the holy, and the beautiful, until every blade of grass, every molecule of energy in all dimensions are but singing the praise of the Father's one name, and the name of God is love. Peace, then, be with us always. Amen.